Hello, everyone, and welcome to Study Group Week 3 of the Road to Google Cloud Certification. This is the path to Google Cloud Associate Developer. And we hope that everyone was having fun and having productive study weeks. This week, I guess that you have studied how to develop and deploy your solutions on different Google Cloud products, such as App Engine, Compute Engine, Kubernetes, Cloud Functions, and maybe Cloud Run. This is one of the main steps of you using GCP, because I can imagine that many of you want to run some sort of workload on your system. This meeting is being recorded, so whatever we show ourselves is going to be available for the others. Don't worry about asking questions. We will be happy to try and respond to all of them. And as usual, this is a peer studying session. So don't hesitate to help others, because this is one of the main roadblocks of what we're going to do in this session together. Today, I'm going to be your host. I'm Saverio from GDG Cloud London, together with Lorenzo from GDG Cloud London. That will be our main speaker tonight. And as you can see, there is Goran, that you have probably seen a lot last week, and he's from GDG London. So welcome. We hope that this was good for you, that you had fun in the previous session. So while we go through some sample questions that should relate to the arguments that you have studied this week, please write in the chat all your doubts, questions, whatever that you want to share with others. And after we have gone through some of these simple questions, we will try and answer them together. And without further ado, I'll give the stage to Lorenzo.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to the right slide. So that's me. No photo. I thought that the default photo was quite cute, so that will stay there. Question, sorry. I didn't snip all the middle one. There it is, sample question review. I was looking at the one for this week, and actually the suggestion was to go, and since many people like to say, hey, this is the answer, I quickly created a link that I'm sending in the chat. If you want to go and try to answer the question yourself in that straw poll link that I sent, then we can see the percentage of people that got it right or not. So reading the question, an education client maintains a site where user can upload videos, and your client need to assure redundancy for the file. Therefore, you have created 2 buckets for cloud storage. Which command do you use to synchronize the content of 2 buckets? Now, this is an interesting question because, and you will sometimes see them in the example, it's nice that it gives you context. It tells you what's going on, why you want to do this. But in reality, at the end of the day, that doesn't give you any hint on the right answer. This is one of those questions that require you to know the command structure, know about the CLI, and how to use it. It's a bit of experience that you need to have, and it's a bit of memory. Beside that, the other strategy, which is also something that we briefly touched on last week, is to try and remember how Google Cloud commands tend to have a structure that is fairly consistent between them. So you often have the name of the utility, in this case, either gcloud or gsutil. Then you have sometime an optional subcomponent. Sorry, the component that you want to modify, then an optional subcomponent, an action, some optional flags, and then some parameter that might be required. Beside that, if we go to the next slide, actually, yeah, let's go to the next slide. Let's see. The right answer is the first one. So as you might remember, Cloud storage is one of those services, one of those products that has a specific CLI to be used with. That is gsutil. So while you might use gcloud to provision your infrastructure and everything, especially if you want to manipulate the things like file that are inside bucket, gsutil is for you. And then I don't know if my mouse pointer can be seen here. Or, oh, nice. So it is gsutil, not gcloud. So it will be either A or D. And another hint that could lead you toward the right answer here would be that CP sync are two different words. So if sync was an option for the copy command, I would expect it to see as a flag rather than a second word. And that led me to saying, yeah, the right answer is A, gsutil rsync, which is the one to sync content between two. Again, this kind of answer, it's experience and memory. You need to remember a bit how the command works. Next one. Let me get the link. And there's the link in chat if you want to go and answer yourself. VPC are something resource. This is a nice question. This tests your understanding on how GCP networking is architected. If the networking is a part that is sometime in the background, you don't really, is not the first thing you think about, but it's important because everything, well, not everything, but a lot of things rely on that. To help you with this, I would suggest to start recalling how those resources are distributed in our hierarchical sense. So GCP by itself is a global service, and that's available over the world. It is divided for some service in a regional location, more often than not called region. You might have Europe West 1, Europe West 2, which is London, and so on. And then again, each region is subdivided in availability zone. Availability zone are subsection of this region. There might be different data center, but the core component is that each region has usually 3 zones, and those zones are close enough to have low latency, but at the same time, they're physically separated. So they have no shared component that risk that, for example, you don't have a shared data power supply. So if one goes down, the other will stay up. And then finally, we have subnets, which is a bit weird because subnets are parts of the VPC itself. When you create a VPC, it will be divided in subnet. So that's your first thing. Subnet doesn't really fit in this. And then in the case of GCP, as we can go here, the right answer is C. VPC are a global resource. When you create a VPC, and if we have some time later, we can do a small demo. When you create a VPC, the VPC spans the whole GCP global reach. The zone themselves, instead, they are regional. And so if you want to divide by region, you need to use zone. Oh yes, I did put an example slide here. So you can see in here, this is the default VPC that you get in GCP. And you can see that each subzone has a dedicated, well, each subzone is in a different region, and it has its own IP address range and plus some extra option for you. Third and last one, and this is a straw poll to see. We're gonna look at the results in the end if I can find. That's interesting. This week is very heavy on networking, even if your study was mostly about computing and everything. The question were again on networking and in this case firewall. And I think this is actually very important because while in your default VPC you do get default firewall rules, it's good to start, but once you want to get to production, once you want to have proper workload, you definitely need to know your stuff around this and set them up in a way that makes sense for your workload. This is especially for security. If you remember, many of the recent data leak or hacks and everything, often they're due to someone leaving an exposed database or an exposed VM open to the internet. Don't skimp on this section, is my suggestion. But now going over the question itself, all of the following are component of firewall rule, except which one? Let's go over each one. So the direction of traffic, it can be ingress or egress, and that is from the point of view of our infrastructure. So egress traffic is all the traffic that goes from your infrastructure VM on anything toward the outside world, and ingress is everything that comes to your VM. Action on match is what it says on the tin. It lets you decide whether you want to allow or deny the traffic. Time to leave TTL is a property of the traffic that you're transmitting. It's defining how much longer before the packets of that traffic will be dropped. And finally, protocol is another property of the traffic. Some examples that are supported would be TCP, UDP, or ICMP. Now, looking at that, one might think, well, direction of traffic and action on match really feels like, component of your firewall. You want to decide which traffic you want to control and what to do with it. Time to live and protocol are two properties that you want to match on. And as you will see, the one that you cannot match on is time to live. So the right answer was C. And this kind of makes sense if you start to reason about it a little bit, because time to live is not really useful to identify your traffic or to understand which kind of traffic you're dealing with. Time to live is something that might even change between connections that are sending the same data. It's something that is more useful to for routing, and in general is not supported as something to decide what to do with your traffic. Again, yeah, we will see in the example, if we have time, protocol is something that you can match on. So you can decide in your firewall setting if you want to allow TCP traffic. And then another thing that you can also match on is port. So for example, you can match and then allow all the traffic on TCP port 22. And again, this is an example. If you remember, I was just saying, when you have your default VPC, you do get some default firewall rule. These are the 4 that you have. And let's take a look at them together. We can see the first one is default allow SSH. It is an ingress rule. So it's for all traffic from the outside to our VM or to our services that live in the VPC. The IP range is 000/0, which means any IP address. And then, as I was saying, TCP port 22, which is usually dedicated to SSH. You technically could have your HTTP traffic on that port, but I would suggest you don't do that. It allows that with a fairly high priority. The higher the lower the priority number, the higher the priority. So the rule number 1 is the one with the highest priority. We also allow ECMP, which doesn't have a port, but is usually the protocol you use for ping. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it should be the ping command. We have another rule that allow all internal traffic is from all the automatic zone that we have. We can see that in here we allow all TCP ports, all UDP port, and CMP. And then by default, we allow from the wider internet RDP, remote desktop. So, and that's why I say, remember to look at this and reason about this, because if you have your workload that maybe is a web server and you want it to be secure, you very probably don't want to allow SSH in from the whole world, or even people trying to establish a remote desktop connection to your server. These were the three questions that we had to review together. I put some links here that probably I'll just, actually, I have already. Let me, oops, that doesn't work, sorry. I wanted to copy them and paste them in the chat. I'll do that in Slack, actually, when we're done with this. And these links are fairly useful to dig deeper in the answer to the question that we had. They describe, again, rsync, the command, some information about VPC, some extra information about how they relate to the VM, the firewall documentation, and something that is also important, the implied firewall rule. So by default, there are 2 firewall rules that are applied to every single VPC, even if you don't define any explicitly. Something that I like to say, again, just to be sure, is that if you go to the official documentation for GCP product, toward the bottom on the left, there is a section called concept. And in there, you quite often have diagrams, explanation, or even high-level overview that helps you understand what is that service for and how it works at a high level. And I think that is a very good resource to spend some time on to study further, I would say. Oh yeah, we got them. Let's see. So in the meantime, while I go and try to take the result of the poll that I posted for the question, if anybody want to if anybody has any question about anything and want to write in the chat.
So the chat has been quite quiet at the moment. Just some information about the calendar and the material to be studied. So I suppose everything was very clear this week, which is nice in a sense. Anybody has a question? Anything? Otherwise, we can, I guess, show the results of the questions, and don't know if we have something else planned.
Yeah, I can do some VPC creation later.
Okay.
So this was the first one. Most people got the right one. Yeah, that's good. And I can see, yeah, a couple of the errors that we had was, again, remembering that is GS util that we want to use to manipulate things in the packet. And it was between cpsync and rsync. And sometimes using the right command, but the wrong utility. And that's something that, yeah, it's hard to reason about it. The second one was VPC resource. See, the majority of people got them right with global. A substantial part about zonal and regional. That might be, that was something that I thought more people might get wrong, because especially if you come from other cloud vendor might slice the network similarly. They still call it VPC, but in some cases they are actually regional resource and the subnet are zonal. So always remember the difference. In GCP, the VPC is global, the subnet are regional. And finally, all of the following are component of firewall rules. And that's interesting. We see quite a few said action on match. I would probably, I don't know, I'm just guessing. I would put this down to maybe the question being worded in a weird way. So a person might think action on match is not a rule for the firewall, but rather is a component that you decide what to do. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, in general, most of the people got time to live, right? So hey, nice. Yeah, let's do. We have time. Let's do some demos. So this was a sample project that I created. If we go to the VPC network, we'll take a bit. That's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. While I was setting up, it was okay, and now it's asking for the compute API. Yeah, I see an answer. Yeah, the action match for me was a bit misleading. Let me see if I can go to the firewall rule. Okay. While we wait, let me get another one. We can take a look. This was a random project that I had. Yeah. So in here, we have our VPC network. As I mentioned, you see the default one, you get one for each region. And the interesting part about the default VPC is that as new region gets added, they will get added here at the bottom with new subnets. When we create a new VPC, we got some options. We can say sample VPC. Not the best name. And you can see we can have two creation mode. One is automatic. And as you can see, it's very similar to what we had for the default one. For each region, a subnet will be automatically created with a certain IP range, leaving some of the IP range free for your own extra custom usage. And you can also decide if you want some firewall rule by default to apply to them. And here at the bottom, you can see the two important implicit firewall rule, which are there all the time. You cannot get rid of them. They are true. One is a deny all ingress. So to all traffic that is coming from the internet to your VPC, any protocol whatsoever, the traffic is denied. And this is a safety net because this means that if you delete all firewall rule in your VPC, your workloads are still not exposed to the wider internet. And you can see that the priority has the highest number possible, which is 65535. This means that any other rule that you create will have higher priority. And then the second one, which is implicit, is the opposite. It's an egress allow all, which means that your VM by default can connect via any protocol to any IP whatsoever without restriction. If we go back to our subnet, we can do a custom one. Custom mode is more advanced. Is something that probably you want to do if you have a bigger project. It's basically lets you define your own subnet. So by default, we're going to call subnet in London. And then for our subnet, as you can see, the regional, we can pick a region. And then we can dedicate some IP address. Now, you can actually choose a very wide range. If I remember correctly, there is even, I think it's still pre-GA support for using non-private IP range, but let's use the standard 10.0.0.0 for now, and let's give it, I don't know, a slice of 20, just to be sure. There are some other options that are very nice. If you want to build something, take a look at them. I won't be too much time on that. And then we can create, and of course I made a mistake because, yes, there was an extra subnet that was not supposed to be there. There you can see, here it's being created. And now we can go to Firewall, and we can see that so far we still only have the firewall rule for the default one. Let's create one. Any suggestion on what we should do as a firewall rule? Anything that you want to open up from to the world, or otherwise I'm just gonna create one. UDP and 22. Okay, let's get to working. Let's use a standard of 1,000, which is okay. For the network, our VPC network, the new one hasn't been created yet, so I use this other custom network that I already had. There's a nice feature, which is logs. It will tell you how your firewall is working, but it does cost a bit if you have a lot of traffic, so by default, keep it off. Ingress, because we want to allow people to get in. We allow, and then this is an interesting part for firewall. We can allow all instances on the network to be matched, or we can even decide on service account or target tag. So we can say we have our instance which are in the public, we tag them with allow public something, and then the firewall rule will apply only to that. For now, let's keep this. Source range, similar thing. In this case, we want to SSH from the word, so we do 0.0.0.0. We have a second filter we don't need. Then in this case, 22, I imagine, is TCP for SSH. So we add, we decide protocol TCP 22. There is a nice thing where you can create rules that are disabled, or you can actually temporarily disable the rule to test if it's breaking your stuff. So SSH to stuff. There it is. And you will be seeing here. That's another one. And then likewise, I'll take UDP 53, just because we know it's for something. That's an extra question for the day. What is UDP 53 used for? Let's see. Goran, you're spoiling the fun. Allow stuff. Similar thing. Ingress priority might be the same since it's not clashing. We allow to all the instance from the word there. And we create it. So you can see it's fairly straightforward to do. And by having the combination of IP ranges, priority, and allow and deny, you can create quite complex setup to suit your need for this, which is very powerful, I would say. I saw that there was a question, what is the secondary IP range used for? That's very nice. So the secondary IP range, I guess it was in here while we were creating a VPC. If we go in edit, sorry, I'm used to do this all the time with Terraform, so the GUI is like that. Going back here, so if you want, you can create a network, a subnet that has more than one continuous range of IPs. And that might be useful if you want to do some specific use case. Now, the only use case that come to mind readily, beside having, I don't know, the first 8 block of, the first 20 block of 10.0.0.0, and then one that you cannot use, you skip it, and then the next one. I know that this is a fairly common configuration for Kubernetes and GKE. I don't know, Savario, what you reckon? Should we go in it, even if it's more like an advanced topic, or?
No, I guess that we will get too vertical in that. So
yeah.
So pretty much you can specify also a secondary IP range that applies grouped together with what you were already doing. Now, the use for it is basically depending on your organization, how they want to rationalize and manage your resources. So like GCP gives you the tools, but at the end of the day, it all comes to your governance. So you probably in your organization, you have some rules, you agree with your team on how you will manage stuff, and then these are the tools with which you implement what you have agreed externally from the actual cloud.
Yeah, but way better than I was going to. Thank you. Maybe I'll do the example in Slack about it. So for whoever is interested or is working with that.
Okay, Goran is also mentioning something interesting, a concept that when I was starting at university was funny for me. Like it was like, wow, what's a DMZ? And once I know what a DMZ is, the name was actually like pretty cool. And it means something, and it's very, very important when you get started with something real. So is there someone that wants to speak about it? Is it Goran? Do you want to tell them what is a DMZ?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can tell about it. So DMZ stands for demarcation zone. So in theory, or in short, I would say, is that it's a zone that you have some, let's say, some VMs or some services that are running and are exposed, but you don't want those services because they're exposed, and if they get compromised, you want to protect the rest of the network. So what do we do? Let's say you have a terminal servers, terminal VMs that you have like connecting people via RDP, TCP 3389 to it. So what you want to do is you would like to assign those two VMs that are acting as terminal servers to a DMZ zone, which means it's somehow also like a no trust zone, which means that it accepts the traffic from outside on RDP 3389. Of course, you don't open to all, let's say, all the world, but you have let's say 100 sites that you open, and if one of those sites gets compromised, the attacker can scan for 3389, but even if it gets to those servers, they are in a DMZ zone, which means that it cannot get inside your network because your firewall rules are strictly prohibiting that, to be honest, to all the rest that you have on the network, sort of like a domain controller and everything. So I think that's in short, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Goran. Like these, the concept that Goran and Lorenzo are speaking about, they actually marry well together, because like one of the things that we are trying to pass on to you is trust no one. So one of the things is that when you start building something and it's not a pet project, it has to you have to consider that there may be some malicious user that want to go against you. And even if you are like, okay, but will they care about me? There are people that just scan the internet. They don't care. It's Goran, Saverio, Lorenzo, whoever. They're going to scan it and try to force it, maybe to use it as a zombie network, or maybe if they can get access to mine coins, paying with your wallet. So trust nobody, and so that's the first rule. And if you really need to expose something on the internet, don't just be like, okay, this is all safe and this is all not safe. Go with a gradient, like go slowly relax your rules using what Goran was saying as a DMZ. Gabriela is asking, so it's better to collocate, for example, database inside our private NAT and or web server on the DMZ. Yes, that could be a way to look at it, because the web server, you know that it's going to be exposed to the internet, so you have to say allow incoming traffic, but maybe then you have an SSL termination on that point, because I don't know if they have discussed about SSL yet in the course, but as a very high level concept, not all your internal communication between your services in your architecture are going to be SSL. So the external part of your architecture, in most cases, is going to be SSL. Then at a certain point in your network, you're going to have a termination in which it gets like decrypted, and then all the rest is going to be a different kind of protocol connection. So yes, that could be albeit a bit simplified, one good use case. Your database should not be exposed to the internet. Your web server, probably you want to have like your users to connect to it. Then you have to see if you want directly to connect your user with your web servers, or you want to go through a little bit of a more complex infrastructure anyway, through a proxy or load balancer that will decide where this web server falls into the hierarchy of your architecture.
There was another one from Arjun. Is there a way to assign the same firewall rule to specific tag and service account? So when you create a firewall rule, you can specify, if I remember correctly, several tags. Let me double check since we have it here. Yeah. So tag 1, tag 2. You can specify multiple tags, but you cannot specify at the same time both tag and service account. What you can do is create two firewall rule with the same setting and target one of them at the service account and one of them at the tag. Private as in AWS. Yeah, in general. And that's also an interesting thing. I mean, the best solution in this case would be use a managed service. And of course, oh yeah, it's SQL. Will it be active? Yes. And when you create the SQL instance, you can decide yourself whenever it should be accessible via public IP or directly through your private network. So in the specific case of Google Cloud, even before having to worry about firewall rule to get to your VPC, because you and hiding your SQL instance, you can make it so that your SQL instance is only reachable from within your private network. Yeah.
Database contains sensitive information. Yes. Okay. Is there any other question about this week's topics or the sample questions, the firewall that we have seen together?
Or actually about the study material, as it was very different and fairly chunky.
Yeah. Okay. Which course we have to start? Well, if the slides give you any indication for this week, it was supposed to be Essential Cloud, Google Cloud Infrastructure, Core Services, while next week is going to be Scaling and Automation and Kubernetes Engine Foundations.
There it is. Mm, I don't know. Call
Have
it
you
early.
have you
Do
had
something.
any experiment this week for some personal project on one of the core services? Have you tried deploying, besides like the quick labs, have you tried deploying something on Cloud Functions or on App Engine? No. Okay. Yeah, okay. What did you do, Gabriele? Sorry if I put you on the spot.
So could I talk?
Yeah, sure. You're welcome to, if you feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. So last year I deployed a web server with Cloud SQL server for a project school because last year was my last year at I school, and so I deployed a simple web server, but uh, with MySQL in the same server because last year I wasn't able to deploy an SQL and to connect the VM instances with Cloud SQL.
Okay, so is this course helping you now moving past the initial problems you were having last year?
Yes, because now a lot of things are so clear because of the course because I mean there are a lot of slides, a lot of quicks a lot of hands-on lab experience.
Mhm.
So I think that it is very useful, and even because here, for example, even if we, for example, text a question, you will answer us. So thank you for
Oh,
that. So I think that it is a great opportunity.
thank you. We're happy that we can help even just one person, hopefully more than one. But yeah, keep keep up the good work, and I'm sure that you will do wonders. I was reading that Riccardo Mori. I'm having difficulties finding a project to work on so I can practice my skill. Okay, I know that sometimes finding the right project can be a challenge in itself. What I can try to advise is okay, you don't need to find the most original new project to work, especially if you're getting started. It would be great if you could find something that matches your other hobbies. So maybe like I may like TV shows or Gundam, or I may like video games. So I usually, when I try to deploy a new API, I end up going like a Gundam API or a video game API, because that will help me also populate the data that I need for my sample tests. So use some of your hobbies as a starting point. But then again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel with the wheel. Actually, reinventing the wheel is a good thing. So if you want to do a very simple management API, something that you can save in a database or in a text file or even in memory, add this data, access this data, filter this data, update this data. That works too, because you get started with using the product. And then usually when you get started, things come to your mind. Oh, nice. I can do that. But can I order the data? Can I return the data filtered by these? Once more, one of the main constraints I would see is what is your background expertise? So which kind of developer are you? Are you familiar with the backend and APIs? Are you a database developer? Do you have some UI experience that can help you showcase the data you fetch from your API? Yeah, well, that usually depends on your background. I think that creating APIs is the simplest way to get started if you are a backend developer. Sometimes it can be tricky if your preferred language is not one of the go-to languages for GCP. Like if you are doing Node or Python or Go, you should be good. No worries. If you have some, or Java also, or vice versa, if you're a C# developer like me, there are resources available, but not always the ones that you might want. So if you have problems, you can go on Medium and check my tutorials on how to deploy your various APIs and projects on the different GCP products on C# and .NET. Let's see if we have some other questions.
Yeah, one which is true, which is nice. Cloud Spanner and Autoscaler. Anybody want to take the first one? Cloud Spanner?
Okay, Cloud
And
Spanner. So
in the meantime, sorry, if you could, by Autoscaler, you mean Autoscaler for VMs or something else, or in general? So we get some clarification in the meantime. Sorry, Saverio.
No, absolutely. Okay, so Benedict, I don't know which link, so if you specify a little bit the links, we can provide it. Okay, I was in San Francisco at Cloud Next when they announced Spanner, which was a big thing at the time. Because usually if you go into databases, especially SQL and relational databases, you can you usually have this constraint of them being mostly vertically scaling, which means that usually you create other instances, you try to make them work together to have a better throughput or less latency or more reliability, having slave master configuration, and usually upgrading the resources you have with databases, but you cannot horizontally scale them as you would with the many NoSQL databases. By horizontally scaling, we mean adding more nodes of that kind of resource. So you have small machines that work in concert to allow you to reach your desiderata. Spanner works internally with the atomic clocks to synchronize the different nodes across the globe to reach virtually SQL database, but that is horizontally scaling across the globe. This allows you to sort of synchronize your SQL instances, even if you have users that are all across the world. Usually, this is a very enterprise product. It's very expensive. So it's unlike that for a personal project or for a small, medium company, you are going to use Spanner. But if your enterprise project has the need to have or an horizontally scalable database that is SQL-like, and that virtually has to have the same data synchronized across the globe, Spanner is the product. When I say virtually relational, is because the interface and the data operation that you can do on Spanner are SQL-like, but it's not a purely relational database. In fact, some of the operations that you're going to perform on Spanner are going to be NoSQL-like. We can go into this, but it becomes a little bit technical. So consider it as enterprise product for relational data that is synchronized globally. The tidbit of nice information is that it works with atomic clocks to synchronize all the instances across the globe, which has several nodes. It's very expensive, it's very powerful, and it works as both as a SQL mainly and NoSQL database. So
Yeah.
service.
And I think it might be a set of questions in the actual architect exam. So not this
Okay.
one, but the next that one. If you get to some question would be, why would you use Spanner? As in, we have these things. Should you use Spanner or a normal SQL? Usually, Spanner is when you start needing something that is globally consistent, they say, and when your data start going in the hundred of gig or, up to petabyte level. So usually is when it become a very massive database. That's the tipping point. The second one was auto-scaling. That's an interesting one because auto-scaling by itself for VMs is something that touch a lot of component of GCP. So by itself, you cannot simply say, I have this VM, please auto-scale. Rather, you need what is called let me get the link in the meantime so I can get it. There it is. Where were we? Oh yeah, you need a group of instance, a managed group of instance. So a managed group of instance is good because it consists of a template that describes exactly how a new VM should be created from scratch. And once you have that, then you can automatically, based on load or other parameter, you have several options in GCP. You can automatically increase or decrease the number of instances. Sorry. And at the same time, just auto-scaling the VM by themselves might not be enough, because if you want to actually serve, I always go back to web traffic from it, then you will need another component, which is a load balancer. And there are several types of load balancers. I'll find a link for that too. And that load balancer will actually route traffic toward all the various VM to keep the load consistent between themselves. And on top of that, it comes into play something like a health check, which is a way for the load balancer itself to understand which VMs are actually ready to receive traffic. And it also, another thing that comes into play is the firewall rule that we just saw, because your VM will need to be made accessible to receive health checks from a specific managed IP that is managed by Google. So to get something to auto-scale, you need to get all the pieces together. And there are guides around on how to do that, official and external. And of course, the whole story about if you want to auto-scale VMs, then you need to make sure that it's a workload that can be scaled. So that more often than not means that your state is pushed somewhere else. So it's in the database or some other storage medium, or that your VMs are as stateless as possible workload. I don't know if I try to give a high level overview, but if you have something more specific, begin.
Great. Okay, so I don't see any other question. Some comparison between Spanner and other DBs, and I'm not sure if they quite fit the bill, because Spanner is quite unique, and I think that maybe together with BigQuery could be one of the main differentiator between the GCP and other cloud providers. Now, given that not all of us have the need for Spanner, and I think that very few companies have the need for Spanner because it's such a enterprise product. please follow the link that Goran provided about the architecture for Spanner, and you will see that it has some very unique quirks and some very unique capabilities that are not matched by other products. Again, once you have seen the architecture, if you want, we can pick back the conversation next week, and we can go into a bit more details about Spanner. Is there a place to practice exam question? I guess that the courses on Pluralsight will give you some recap with questions at the end. Again, there is one simple exam question on the website for the certification. It's always the same. So once you do it, that's it. We will try and provide you more questions as we go through. Now, if this is all, we wish you a great week, and we will see you all during the week on Slack, and again on the screens on Monday for week 5 now. I think that someone has messaged me on Slack already, and I will try to reply right after dinner time, which is probably going to be about the program of the next few weeks. So we can catch a breath and then continue in the evening. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.